Hello everyone. In this video we will see about the curse of Egypt. The Egypt, till date stands as a limitless territory for secrets and yet unresolved mysteries. One such history we are about to see is the plagues of Egypt. Many of us would have definitely come across this term constantly at least once. In my case, almost every time I study something on Egypt's history. How this started? Did people of Egypt really face the so-called plagues? Let us see. The origin of the plagues of Egypt is said to be inflicted upon the Egyptians by the God of Israel. It goes something as follows. Moses was a great prophet, called by God of Israel to convince Pharaoh of Egypt to allow the Israelites freedom from their slavery to the Egyptians. When Pharaoh refuses to grant their freedom, it is said that the Lord of Israel got angry and unleashed his agony in the form of 10 curses to the Egyptians, until he agrees to the freedom of the slaves. The number 10 is a significant number in biblical numerology. It represents a fullness of quantity. 10 Egyptian plagues means completely plagued, each time increasing the severity of the consequence of the plagues. 10 times Pharaoh refuses and receives each plagues. So, this is said to be the origin of the plagues cursed upon Egypt. Now let us see what are the 10 plagues are. Number 1, water turned to blood. This is the first curse put upon Egypt, where the world's one of the longest river Nile, will turn red and flows as blood. To unleash the first plague, Moses struck the river Nile with his staff, turning its waters to blood, in the canals, tributaries, ponds and pools throughout Egypt. After the Nile turned into blood, every living organisms in the Nile River died. The river stank for 7 days, the water throughout all the land of Egypt remained stale, unsuitable for the people to drink or use it for a living. A small fact about this in theories is that, it is said that a scientist named John S. Marr, an epidemiologist, who wrote a 1996 journal article featured in the New York Times, argues that red algae could have sucked oxygen out of Egypt's waterways, killed the fish and turned the water red. Hence proved. Number 2, Plague of Frogs. For the second plague, vast quantities of frogs that swarmed into people's homes, even finding their way into the Egyptians' beds, ovens and cookware. The Nile River brought the frogs abundantly from water to surfaces. The frogs came up from the river and were in their houses, in their food, in their clothing, in every place possible. From the pharaoh to common people, no one in Egypt escaped the plague of frogs. The phenomenon of raining frogs has been reported multiple times throughout history and in a range of locations around the world. A report published in Scientific American described a shower of frogs which darkened the air and covered the ground for a long distance. Imagine frogs everywhere on your house and bed. Number 3, lice from the dust of the earth. This is a disgusting and very uncomfortable plague that came from the dust of the earth. When the dust became lice, it is said to have spread throughout all the land, on both people and all living animals like cattle and livestock. Due to this, people of Egypt yet suffered another crisis. Imagine the air and dust around us turning into lice. Number 4, swarms of flies. With the fourth Egyptian plague, similar to frogs and lice, the Lord plagues Egypt with swarms of flies. The entire Egypt was swarmed by numerous flies, disturbing the livelihood of the people living. Though it is said the people of Israel left unaffected by this, and it was only borne upon the people of Egypt. Flies everywhere surrounded the entire country, leading to a more affected livelihood of the people. Number 5, death of cattle and livestock. It is said that the Lord, once again demanded the Pharaoh to release the people from the slavery, or the next Egyptian plague to occur. The fifth plague called down on Egypt was a mysterious and highly contagious disease, that swiftly killed off the Egyptians' livestock and cattle. This plague indirectly affected the Egyptians by creating a huge economic disaster, in areas of food, transportation, military supplies, farming, and economic goods that were produced by these livestock and cattle, disrupting the business and food chain. Number 6, ashes turned to boils and sores. This is the sixth and unannounced Egyptian plague is given, for the first time, directly attacking the Egyptian people themselves. Soon after the livestock plague, Egyptians cursed with the plague of boils and sores. A viciously inflicted curse of boils that covered their bodies. Boils were painful bumps surrounded by red, swollen skin, causing the Egyptians uncomfortable physical pain. Cleanliness being paramount in the Egyptian society, this plague pronounced the people unclean. Number 7, hail rained down in the form of fire. As the plagues increased in number, it also became more and more brutal. This plague brought hail of unspeakable size and ability to destroy. It would rain water down from the sky and turn into fire as it hits the ground. Thus it rained hail of fire and thunder upon Egypt. The hail struck down all the crops in the fields and shattered every tree. An interesting fact is that, the crops that were destroyed by the hail consisted of flax and barley, which were ripening in the fields. These two particular crops though were not the mainstay of their diet, but were used more specifically for their clothing and libations. This destruction made life even more uncomfortable, but as far as affecting their food supply, the wheat still survived. Number 8, locusts sent from the sky. Well, this crisis is something we have been hearing frequently even in this period. This is the second wave of destruction to follow the hail, and whatever crops were left intact after the hail fire, were now completely consumed by the swarms of locusts that were unleashed from the sky. This definitely affected the life source of the people by hitting them in their food supply. This was more brutal plague where the Lord commenced the curse, so that after this the Egyptians are left to eat only the residue of what has remained from the hail fire, and locusts attacked. It is said that the people were left to eat every tree which grew up out of the field. This happening needs no separate scientific proof, as we face this even in the modern days in many parts of the world. Number 9, 3 days of complete darkness. Darkness now fell upon Egypt, unannounced, as a beginning of the future fate to be felt by the Egyptian Empire. 3 days of visible darkness, that was so immense, it could be physically felt, covered the land of Egypt. The sun, being the most worshipped god in Egypt other than Pharaoh himself, gave no light. It is said that the Lord showed that he had control over the sun as a witness that he had ultimate power over life and death. This impacted the psychological and religious belief of the people, to have a profound influence on the Egyptians at this point. A fact here is that, the early Egyptians felt darkness was a representation of death, judgment and hopelessness. Darkness was a complete absence of light, which completely shattered the strength of the people. Number 10, death of the firstborn. This is the last and most deadliest curse, where all the firstborn in the land of Egypt would perish. This is the scariest plague that shook the people completely, as it affected the firstborn sons and sons of the Pharaoh himself. There were continuous death that spread throughout the country. All these 10 plagues said to be lasted until the people of Israel were freed of slavery by the pharaohs. As we know, right from Egyptians' pyramids to Pharaoh's mummification, we have proofs that they are not just another mythological event. Similarly, it is said that for all these 10 plagues, scientists have a supporting theories for the possible ways it could have happened in the ancient history. Maybe they happened, maybe they didn't. Yet another interesting resting factor as mystery on Egypt. Thanks for watching.